Hi everyone, welcome to today's Science Versus Bullshit. I'm gonna very quickly do that really annoying thing where I'm like, did I go live? Because I still can't see where I'm meant to be looking. Dashboard? Probably not. Home. Home. No, I still can't really tell. If anyone does come on live, tell me that you're here and then I'll be able to. Oh, okay, right, I can see my times, which is strange. But anyway, right, fine, we're here. We're live. We have excellent questions. Let me get them up. Obviously, if anyone has any live, fire away. Okay, the first one is, hi, I was wondering, with your knowledge, thank you, if you could explain if you could explain, full stop. If I diet and I just walk as exercise, I will lose weight. If I diet and I walk and then I lift twice a week, I don't lose weight, I just stay the same. Yes, I do change shape, but my weight stays the same and I have weight to lose. Any ideas? I've always done some form of gym or sport or classes regularly and fairly active job, i.e., I don't sit down. Thank you. Okay, so the truth of this is, if you diet and you don't exercise, you will lose more weight, which a lot of people hear and are like, what? That sounds insane. Or, okay, well, then I just won't exercise. You're losing more weight because you're not only losing fat, but you're also losing a bit of lean tissue as well, of which some of is muscle mass. So it's definitely not a good thing. The other thing I'll say about this is that you are probably being a little bit impatient to an extent. And then finally, and I'm just kind of reading between the lines here, and realistically, like for any questions like this, I'll just kind of play off my own experience and what the research says. But for an individual, I'd need to know a little bit more context to this. But it sounds to me like you're probably not in a very big deficit, because for sure there's the argument of like, you might be building muscle while you're losing fat. Now, if you're building muscle, that obviously weighs something. And if you're losing fat at the same time, maybe your weight would just stay stable. The truth is, if you have a decent amount of fat to lose, even if you were managing to build muscle at the same time, you would still lose weight, right? So it's not an equal thing. It takes much longer to build muscle generally than it does to lose fat, especially if you have quite a lot of fat to lose. And you'll find it very hard, for example, to lose 10 pounds of fat in 12 weeks and gain 10 pounds of muscle. Like, that's just not going to happen. So it might mask some fat loss on the scales, but it's not going to mask all your fat loss on the scales if, like you're saying, you have quite a lot of fat to lose. So it could be that you're maybe compensating for the extra movement or exercise with eating a little bit more, either consciously or subconsciously. And one of the reasons that people do this is because often their like Apple Watch or Garmin or whatever they're using will tell them that they've burnt a certain amount of calories during exercise. This is usually overhyped, so like it usually estimates that you've burnt more than what you actually have. And sometimes it will also account for your basal metabolic rate or your resting metabolic rate, i.e. your like staying alive calories. So it might say you've burnt, I don't know, 200 calories in your workout, but a specific, like a decent percentage of that is probably just spent being alive during that time, that you would have expended anyway. So I'd be quite careful with eating back the calories that your watch has said that you've expended. Generally, if you've said here that you're training like 2 times a week or something, I wouldn't even account for them. Like I wouldn't be thinking, oh, on those days I should eat a bit more. I'd just stick to your deficit, even on the days that you're working out. Yeah, generally the calories that you expend during exercise are depressingly low, but that's not what exercise is for. So don't overthink that stuff. And if you do have any more questions on this, do fire away. And I think it's quite a common thing for people to worry about or get a little bit confused about. But this is another thing that's come up a lot recently with people using weight loss drugs like Mounjaro. And that is the, one second. Now I've lost it. But basically, again, you will lose more weight if you're not exercising, but you're losing quite a lot of lean tissue as well, which is not something that we want to be doing. I actually just took on a client who was not resistance training, despite being a doctor, was not resistance training while taking Monjaro. So now they will be resistance training. Okay, next one. Does a calorie deficit or quote unquote starving yourself mean that your body does go into starvation mode / panic mode, and therefore you are stuck not losing weight and you just need to eat more? I apologize, as I am almost certain I've heard you answer this before, but want to make it clear to myself. It's just that an ex-PT who apparently emotionally abused me, although had no idea at the time, as she became an important figure to me, so I always listened to what she would say, has posted this recently, and I thought I heard that wasn't correct. So many conflicting things, even from the same people a lot of the time. Yeah, and that is a kind of a sign that someone doesn't really understand like what's going on a deeper level. Anyway, she says, is this a case of not actually consuming what you thought you were and underestimating or tracking? My brain is fried. So I do go over this a lot, but I don't mind going over it a lot because obviously it's confusing people, right? And you do see a lot of people, and you're right, often even the same people kind of contradicting themselves. And that's usually because their understanding is quite surface level, or because they've seen someone else say something. They're like, oh, that's done well on so and so's Instagram page. I'll just say basically the same message. Or they've asked ChatGTP to write them something about starvation mode, and then it's come up with this spiel that they're just repeating online. Like, and there's no like deeper understanding of like, if you were actually questioned on that, could you explain why that would be happening and what's going on behind it? So if we take a step back and we take the lens off like the view of this relationship, which is something else I want to talk about, this person is basically saying that you need to eat more to lose weight, and the reason that you're not losing weight is because you're eating too little. From a calorie balance perspective, this is untrue. Undoubtedly, we've got a ton of research to show this. This is just, if that did happen, people would never starve. This isn't happening. You can't magically produce energy that you haven't consumed. That's not what's happening. From a behavioral perspective, it often is true that you're eating too little, or at least trying to eat too little, i.e., trying to stick to very low calories and not being able to do that long term. But this is only because eating very little often means that you don't stick to it for a very long time and you end up overeating. So over time, if you look over like the course of a month, you've actually eaten more, not less. If you genuinely consume fewer calories long term and maintain a deficit, you will lose fat. There's no way that you can't lose fat. Like, that's not a disputed thing. But what is much more likely to be happening is that you get bored of sticking to very low calories. You get hungry from sticking to very low calories. You get moody. You get tired. You get cravings. And you end up overeating. And then you often get into this horrible cycle of you've overeaten, you feel guilty about the fact that you've overeaten. So then you cut your calories back down to, what you were trying to stick to before to quote unquote make up for it. And then you're stuck in this cycle of over restricting for a couple of days, finding that you can't stick to it, binging, and then over restricting again to try and make up for the binge. And that's actually can be really, really hard for people to get out of. And if you are in that situation, what you need to do is bring your calories up, not to revamp your metabolism, but to a sensible amount where you're actually fueling yourself so that you can stick to that for a long enough period of time to actually see results and to feel good. The whole point, good dieting is about feeling better, not worse, not, dieting yourself into not being able to enjoy food or time with your family or being able to train and recover and just having a constant preoccupation with food. That's not what we want here. And then another point I want to make is more about like your relationship with your personal trainer, which I find really interesting and is so unbelievably common. And I think it's because there's this interesting like power dynamic, and you see it in like any kind of, well, I guess like in loads of different ways, whether it's like your ugly boss who you kind of have like a bit of a crush on just because they're your boss. And so like, I don't know, there's like the power dynamic. or personal trainers all the time, or like a teacher or something. By the way, I'm not saying you have a crush on this person. That was just an example, but they do become like potentially quite an influential person in your life. I think there's something especially about a personal trainer, because when you this is true online and in person, but I definitely think in person you end up talking about so many aspects of somebody's life, and you end up kind of being a bit of a, I wouldn't say therapist because that's far too far, but I mean like a sounding board, or a way for them to like offload. I think a lot of what a lot of my clients used to get from working in person with me was just being able to like talk about how they felt about other things in their life, whether it was their relationship or their husband or their career or what you know, whatever was going on. And that does end up having like quite a big influence. And also, usually people are coming to a coach or a personal trainer, they think they're coming for fat loss, but often it's much bigger than that. You know, they want to change a significant part of their life. And you end up talking about things that go far beyond just like, are you sticking to your calories or not? And even when you delve in on that, it's like, okay, well, you're not sticking to your calories. Why is that? Oh, because I'm emotionally eating because I'm in a horrible relationship I don't want to be in, or I'm overeating because I absolutely hate my job. You know, there's normally an underlying reason for these behaviors, as opposed to just like, oh, I'm just overeating and there's no reason for it. Usually, if someone has a fat loss goal, there's an underlying reason that they haven't already achieved that. And that often has far more to do with like how fulfilled they feel in the rest of their life and how happy and content they are in the rest of their life, not just like the calories themselves or the education around food themselves. So I thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, there is also a bit of a power play, and probably why so many people end up falling for their personal trainers. If anyone has fallen for their personal trainer, you can share in the comments. I would love to hear. Okay, next question. Okay, this one was on GLP-1 microdosing. So taking like a small amount of GLP-1 drugs. So whether that be like Mounjaro or Ozempic, or I think will probably be more common with a new drug that will be coming out next year, which is like a pill form of a very similar drug, which I think Eli Lilly will be producing. And I imagine, and that's going to be far less potent than the injectable type drugs. And I do imagine that a lot of people will microdose that. Whether I think that's a good or bad thing is neither here nor there, but will people do it? 100% they will. In fact, people already microdose. It's just quite hard to do given the way that, for example, Mounjaro is prescribed. It's quite hard to microdose it. Now, I kind of wish that more people would microdose it, because I think for a lot of people, it would be a much more useful tool and leave them in a much happier, healthier place if they were, for example, taking enough to reduce their appetite a small amount, so that they would stick to, say, maybe for a woman like 1,500 calories instead of what's happening a lot, which is that people get so full that they're maybe only eating 800 odd calories a day, and also just not particularly picking good food choices within those 800 calories. So they end up eating kind of 800 calories of like a glass of wine, some nuts that they're nibbling, and like half a sandwich, and then wondering why actually their body composition is shit and their mood is low and their energy levels are so low. Like, you're in a huge deficit, and the choices that you've made within that deficit are pretty fucking awful. That's why you don't feel good. That's why your hair's falling out. You know, like that's why you're malnourished, and that's why the long-term health implications aren't good. But when these drugs are used in a smarter way, that the outcome can be very different. And I think if you're sensible with the dose and you're eating enough to still fuel yourself, but maybe you've turned down hunger slightly, that would be a much more sensible way to be doing things. And like, some people will want to do that, other people won't. And I think we will kind of whittle out who this would be most useful for, because if you don't have a problem with your appetite, I mean, there's kind of two arguments that I have for this. One is that we live in an obesogenic environment, and I think left to our own devices, most people naturally overeat. That's why the average person is overweight. But then on the other side of it, I'm like, I quite like being hungry now and again. I quite like being hungry before dinner. I quite like enjoy food more when I feel that way. I don't think I'd want to take a drug that makes me feel quite sick if I eat even like a normal amount. And again, this might change with the microdosing. Anyway, the question was, do I think it will be a thing? And the answer is yes, and actually it already is a thing for a lot of people. A lot of I guess basically if you have money, then you can already do it if you want to. And a lot of people do. Okay, next question. Nutrition and training around PCOS for fertility. This could be a whole podcast in itself, but I'll just go over maybe three. I was going to say a few that might be three key points. The first one is if you are overweight, and this goes for anyone, whether it's you've got PCOS or not, then losing weight will increase your fertility. If you need to aim to get into a healthy BMI range, and all the other health behaviors of like sleeping well, eating well, training well, consistently exercising, like that is just a general picture. If you want to increase your fertility, the main things that you'd be looking at initially would be like, what's your diet like? What's your sleep like? Are you exercising consistently? And are you in a healthy BMI range? That would be the first aim. Then on top of that, and I would say especially if you have PCOS, I'd be looking at the type of resistance training or the type of exercise that you're doing. So certainly resistance training, probably a bit of HIIT training to increase insulin sensitivity. I'd also, if this has been a while and you are, especially if you're like lean PCOS, so you are in a healthy BMI range, I would probably go and speak to your doctor and see if you can get tests for HbA1c, fasting glucose, fasting insulin, or even better, HOMA-IR test and insulin resistance test. I'd get a lipid panel, vitamin D. Yeah, that's ideally what I would ask for from your doctor, so that you can see whether maybe insulin resistance is a problem for you. And then the other thing that's very interesting, and there isn't a huge amount of research on it, but if I was in this position, I'd definitely be trying it because I don't really see any downside to it apart from just, I don't know, preference. But if you've got a big enough why of like, I want to start a family, then, you can make this shift. It's not the hardest shift in the world. And that's basically eating more at the start of the day and less at the end of the day. And there's one really interesting study on this where they matched calories between two groups. So all these women had PCOS and irregular cycles, and they matched calories between the groups. And the difference between the groups was that one group had a big breakfast, small lunch, smaller dinner. The other group had a small breakfast, small lunch, big dinner. So they just basically swapped the calories in breakfast and their evening meal. And what they found was that the women who ate more at breakfast had a significantly increased insulin sensitivity and more regular cycles than the group that had the bigger dinner in the evening. And like I said, calories and macros matched between the groups. So the only difference was the meal timings. Now, I was quite surprised by that. There is theory behind this, but I didn't think it would have such a big impact. And what was really interesting was the impact on fertility, or like cycle consistency, cycle regularity, just from the timing of meals. So if that was me, or if I was working with a client, I'd be like, let's see if we can move these. One of the reasons that works so well is that you're eating more food at a time when you're more active. So most people, have a long day, probably graze on a few things, grab a sandwich at lunch, or, something small, and then they're pulled into meetings, whatever, they're really busy. And then they get home and they have a massive meal. And then they sit on the couch and then they do nothing. And that's really bad for insulin sensitivity. So if you're already someone who's potentially insulin resistant, which is very common with women with PCOS, and then you have this huge glucose load in the evening and then you don't move. So there are two ways that you can clear blood glucose. One is insulin, And the other one is exercise. So it's an insulin independent way of clearing glucose. Now, exercise, really what I mean is movement. So it could just be that you've had breakfast and now you're walking to get the train to work, or you're taking the kids to school and you're kind of moving around and you're doing stuff. You're not just sat on your ass watching TV, which is what most of us do in the evening. That's no judgment. There's nothing, that's totally fine. But we're less active in the evening. So now you've got this big glucose load and then you're just sitting doing nothing, which makes it very hard to clear glucose, versus in the morning, you're moving a lot more. And then the other reason for this is that insulin sensitivity peaks at around 12, so noon, and then it starts to reduce throughout the day. For most people, this doesn't massively matter. And also there are so many other things that come into this, like specifically exercise timing. So if you exercise later in the day, then I would kind of ignore what I've just said about insulin sensitivity peaking. Exercise is such a potent stimulator of insulin sensitivity that if you exercise at 6 p.m., you're going to be very insulin sensitive after that. But that would be another thing that I would be considering if you have PCOS and you're struggling with fertility. Okay, I'm going to leave it there today, unless anyone has any questions live, which I don't think anybody does. But I can see that there are people live. So if you have anything that you want me to go over, let me know. Those questions are very good. I very much enjoyed them. Did I have any others? I think I had a video that I was meant to watch from Kim, who I can see is here, and I forgot to watch it. I never have like sound on things. So then I'm like, I'll watch that when I have sound. And then inevitably I don't have sound. Yeah, so I'm very sorry about that. But Kim, I will get back to that, I promise. Okay, right, everyone, have incredible evenings. Fire away if you have anything else you want me to cover. And that's all. Oh, no, wait, I have got a question, sorry. Can I ask a question? If someone is on prescription supplement drinks, can they take Manjaro? I've argued with my stupid friend over this. Prescription supplement drinks. I don't know what the prescription supplement drinks would be. I'd need to know what the drinks are. If you have any more info for me, fire away. But I can't think why if someone is on prescription supplement drinks, can they take Manjaro? I would assume yes. I think in many ways, not that I'm a big fan of like, if these are kind of ready to drink shakes that are meant to have everything in them, then it actually might be quite a good thing to be taking if you're on Manjaro, because one of the big negatives is that often if you push yourself to the max dose, you're often eating very little, which leaves you open to being quite deficient in many things. And if you are taking a drink that's got like carbs and protein and fats and vitamins and minerals and like extra, like, fortified in this and this and this, then actually it's probably not a bad thing to be consuming. But I'd be thinking of that almost the other way around, of like, if she was taking Manjaro, then actually having a like kind of ready to drink that covers all your bases might be a good thing. Although I'd much prefer that people take a sensible dose and actually eat food, because also it's going to be much easier to come back off that. If you think about this is the other reason why when people are like, I'm quite envious of anyone on Manjaro, I'm like, I don't really think you should be, because it will always come back to, you still have to maintain it in some way, right? And do you really want to live the rest of your life eating 800 calories? Most people don't, right? So then you've got to find like some kind of balance here, whether that does mean that you're on a very low dose, but you're always going to have to learn maintenance. You're going to have to learn how to eat and enjoy your life while maintaining the body that you want to maintain in a healthy way, right? So this is only ever a short-term thing. Now, if you were on Manjaro and only drinking like a Slim Fast shake or something like that, then it's definitely not going to be enjoyable. You're not going to stick to it long term. It's going to be much harder to come off, because there's such a big difference now between what would be like a normal healthy maintenance diet and your diet on Manjaro. Whereas if you were taking a smaller dose and maybe you're eating 1,500 calories and you're getting in enough protein, and you're getting in some fruit and veg there, there's not that much of a difference between that diet and then transitioning into maintenance. And from the people I've worked with, I've definitely found that the people who have been on higher doses have found it significantly harder to come off than the people on lower doses. That's not particularly shocking news, but it's just something to consider, like how different that is. And for a lot of people, by the end of their dieting phase, their maintenance calories aren't that different, and like their life and their diet isn't that different. Will you just marry me because obviously I have a crush? Yeah, I mean, it happens a lot. It's the power dynamic. Quality and enjoyment of life versus being thin forever. I know what I pick exactly, right? And then this is the argument: you don't need to pick one or the other. And I don't like the term thin, but I know what you mean. Like, okay, you could be lean, happy, healthy, active, and enjoy your life, but you need to find that kind of balance between the two. And it's certainly not going to be, just drinking Slim Fast shakes on Manjaro. Like it's the kind of new equivalent to like a quick fix diet when people are like, yeah, but I don't care. I just want to do it for a couple of weeks to lose the fat, and then somehow I'll just be able to maintain it. It's much better to just actually commit to doing it the right way, even if you know that it's going to take a little bit longer. And if you do want to do that, head over to esgfitness.co.uk, fill in the application form, and I'll get back to you. God, how smooth was that? So smooth. Right, I am going to end there. Thank you for the excellent questions. Jenny, if you want to chat to me about that, you can message me afterwards, as can anyone else, because I'm very friendly. Okay, bye.